What's going on, guys? So a few weeks ago, I made a video about how OP bards are. If you didn't get a chance to watch it, I'll put it up in the corner of this video so you can go check it out. But anyway, since making that video, I discovered an even more broken bard build. I mean, this build is it's crazy how good it is. So we're going to go over what you need to build it, the items that you need, how it plays, all that sort of thing. This build is so good, it makes some of the hardest fights ridiculously easy. So we're going to show you how to do it. So let's jump into it. For this build, if you're starting from the beginning of the game, you're going to want to start off as a bard. You're going to eventually respec, but the reason why we want to start as a bard is this allows us to get a hand crossbow from the start of the game. This will make obtaining a second hand crossbow much easier, as you will only need to buy or find one instead of buying or finding two. You want your stats to look something like this. I'll take a second here so you can screenshot or pause the video. For your cantrips, you want Vicious Mockery, and the other one doesn't really matter, but you definitely want to make sure that you take Vicious Mockery. For your spells, for the most part, the only spells that really matter, or the only spell that matters, is Tasha's Hideous Laughter. We'll go into why that matters a little bit later on in the video, but you want to make sure you take Tasha's Hideous Laughter. The rest of the spells don't really matter. It's really up to whatever you or your party needs. I usually find myself being the Longstrider bot, so I just kind of on default take this spell on my bard, but feel free to take whatever other spell you want or need. But this would be the spell setup. Starting instrument also doesn't really matter. Once you get your second hand crossbow, you're going to want to respec into a ranger. Your favorite enemy doesn't really matter too much, it's really up to you. I usually go for Mage Breaker, but this is more of just a personal preference thing. The buff that it provides is pretty minuscule, and it doesn't really matter that much, okay? As far as Natural Explorer goes, you're going to want to go Beast Tamer. The reason you want to do this is this allows us to summon our familiar without expending a spell slot, and you do get this back on a short rest. So if your pet does die, you can use a short rest to resummon it should you need to. And as far as the actual familiar that you're going to want to use, it's almost always going to be the crow, as the crow can blind, which gives you advantage on enemies that the crow blinds. Keep your stats the same as you had them with the bard setup. You're going to want to take Ranger to level 4. We are going to eventually respec into Ranger 3 Bard 9, but we want to take Ranger to 4 to not delay our first feat. You could also take Ranger all the way to level 5 to not delay your second attack as well, but it's not really super necessary. For level 2, for our spells, we're going to take Fog Cloud, and we're going to either take Longstrider, Speak with Animals, or Enhance Sleep. Whichever one your party needs, take one of those. Fog Cloud is pretty important for this build. The other spells are more so just quality of life things. As far as our fighting style goes, we're going to be choosing archery. We are almost never going to be in melee unless we have to, so we're going to be wanting to choose archery here. Level 3, you're going to take whatever spell you didn't take at level 2. You might be tempted to take Hunter's Mark here. I feel like Hunter's Mark in Baldur's Gate 3 is kind of a trap. Wasting a bonus action to do more damage on the next attack is almost never really worth it, except in boss fights. It's usually better just to use that bonus attack to attack again. For our subclass, we're going to choose Gloomstalker because this is going to give us an extra free attack on turn 1 and it does bonus damage. It also gives us +3 to initiative and it gives us increased movement speed. At level 4, we're going to take the feat Sharpshooter. This gives us a -5 to hit, but it makes our attacks do a bonus 10 damage. This is incredibly nice for us because we attack multiple times a turn, and the extra 10 damage really does add up. You can toggle this feat on or off in your passives tree. If you find that you're going against an enemy that has a lot of AC, or if you have disadvantage for whatever reason, you can turn this off. That way you can at least still hit the target, because if you have a -5 to hit and you have disadvantage, or they've got incredibly high AC, it's basically going to be impossible for you to hit them, so you can just turn this off if you run into those kind of situations. At level 5, you have the option to put another level into Ranger to get a second attack, or you can start putting levels into Bard. This is completely up to you. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, our final split is going to be Ranger 3, Bard 9, but this leveling process just makes it so we're as strong as we can be as we're leveling, and we don't have any quote-unquote bad levels. If you decide to put another level into Ranger, there's not really a decision that you need to make. It's just getting that extra attack. If you decide to start to put levels into Bard, then we're going to do basically the same exact thing we did at the beginning of the game. We want to make sure that we have Vicious Mockery. Our second cantrip doesn't really matter. For our spells, we want to make sure we have Tasha's Hideous Laughter. The rest of the spells don't really matter too much. And our starting instrument and our abilities are not going to really change unless you want to change your skill proficiencies for whatever reason. Bard level 2 is relatively uneventful level for us, but we do get access to Song of Rest, which is pretty nice. As far as your spell choice here, it doesn't really matter too much. Just pick whichever one you want. If you, whatever one that you didn't pick before, maybe you didn't grab Speak with Animals, just grab that one here. Bard level 3 is when things start to get interesting for our character. So we open up access to our subclass, which we're going to be going with College of Swords. If you don't know what all the different subclasses of Bard do or why we're picking College of Swords here, I'm not going to go super in-depth in this video, but I will put a card in the corner here where I go into pretty good detail on the different subclasses and which ones I think I prefer over the others. But with that being said, we're going to be choosing College of Swords. Our spell pick here is pretty important. We're going to be grabbing Hold Person. We're going to go over why a little bit later in the video, but you definitely want to make sure you grab Hold Person here. As far as our fighting style, we are going to be choosing 2-weapon fighting. The reason being is because we are going to be using 2-hand crossbows, and the ability to add our ability modifier to our offhand is awesome. Just going to make us do a ton more damage. At Bard level 4, you have a couple options here. As far as our cantrips go, they don't really matter too much. We don't care about any of these, so just pick whichever one that you want. Same with our spells. For this level, there's not really any spells that are super relevant for the build, so just pick whichever one you want. If you want to grab Enhance Ability, or if you want to grab Lesser Restoration, Invisibility, really up to you. Whatever you want to grab here, it really doesn't have too much effect on the build. Now, at this point, you can choose to respec here if you want to. You can go to Ranger 3, Bard 5. This would be the final respec for the build. So if you choose to respec here, you are going to delay your second feat, but I feel like delaying your second feat is not as important as delaying your first feat. Delaying your first feat is really bad, whereas delaying your second feat is not really super detrimental. So either way, you can do it either way, but if you decide, whenever you do decide to choose your feat, you have a couple options here. So the first one is going to be Alert. This is going to give you +5 bonus to initiative and make sure that you're never surprised. So you will always go first every single fight, which is a huge bonus. The second option that you can go with is you can go with Magic Initiate Cleric. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but there's a reason why, which will get explained very shortly in the video. As far as our cantrips go, they don't really matter. The main thing that we care about is the spells, and we want to grab Command. So those are your two options. I usually prefer to go for Alert, but you can go this option. This is going to give us another enchantment spell to cast when we go a little bit deeper into the items and how it works with the build. At this point, I'm going to assume that you have already respec to the final level split of level 3 Ranger and then level 9 Bard. So we're going to be going with that moving forward. So for level 5 Bard, you really don't get too much to choose from. You're going to want to choose either an illusion spell or an enchantment spell here. Fear is a good option. Also Hypnotic Pattern, really up to you. I usually pick Fear here, but it's really up to you. But you definitely want to grab either an illusion spell or an enchantment spell here. Bard level 6 is also relatively uneventful. We do get another attack, which is pretty nice, and we get one of the probably worst actions in the entire game, Counter Charm. I don't think I've ever used this or known anybody that's ever used this. It's pretty useless. I think it should be a bonus action or a free action or even just a reaction. The fact that it's a whole action, I think it's kind of crap, but we get access to that, and we do get another spell. Just grab whatever spell you didn't grab at level 5. So we grabbed a Fear last time, so we're going to go ahead and grab Hypnotic Pattern here. Bard level 7, not too much happens in this level either. We do get to have another spell. You can feel free to choose Confusion here or any of the other enchantment or illusion spells you didn't grab earlier. Conversely, you can also grab Freedom of Movement. This is a pretty useful spell. It allows you to get an ally out of a stun and also makes it so where difficult terrain can't affect them and they can't be paralyzed or restrained. Pretty helpful. You know, if your healer gets stunned or knocked down or paralyzed, something like that, you can make it so where they are not paralyzed. So pretty helpful spell, but you can always just grab one of the enchantment or illusion spells if you don't want to grab that one. Bard level 8, we get access to an additional spell, and we also get our second and final feat since the respec. Our spell choice here doesn't matter too much. I'm going to grab Freedom of Movement because I grabbed Confusion last level. And then as far as our feat goes, you have two options I think are probably the best. You can either go with Alert, which is going to give you +5 bonus to initiative and make sure you can't be surprised. Or you can go with Magic Initiate Cleric, which gets access to Command, which we're going to go over in a little bit on how that works with the build. Our 9th and final level in Bard is what ties the entire build together, and we're going to be grabbing Hold Monster here. So you're probably wondering why we're taking specifically enchantment and illusion spells on a swords bard that's using hand crossbows. There are two items that tie this build together and make it really OP. The first item is the Helmet of Arcane Acuity. This item grants a stack of Arcane Acuity that lasts for 2 turns each time you deal damage with an attack. Since we're able to attack so many times a turn, we're able to stack this really high, really fast. Arcane Acuity gives us a +1 to spell attack rolls and a +1 spell save DC. Since we attack so many times a turn, we're able to guarantee that enemies are hit by our spells and that they auto-fail the spell DC. You can find this helmet in a locked and trapped gilded chest in a secret area of the Wreathwine Masons Guild basement in Act 2. The second item is the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel. This ring will allow us to cast an enchantment or illusion spell as a bonus action whenever we hit an enemy with an attack. You can find this item on a corpse in the jungle of Act 3. You reach this jungle by being teleported by a djinn who you beat in a game of chance. The only way to beat him is to either buy his ring of Mage Hand or steal it off of him, as he is using the ring to cheat, making it impossible for anybody to win. Hopefully you're starting to see things come together now. We pew a few times, get a bunch of stacks of Arcane Acuity, and then we can hold person, hold monster, or command as a bonus action with a 100% chance to succeed. You can basically permanently lock down any of the big bad evil guys and make them look like absolute chumps. Anytime an enemy is held with hold person, hold monster, or command halt, every hit against them is considered to be an auto crit. One of the coolest things about Baldur's Gate 3 is the awesome and unique itemization that the game has. So for this build, the items I'm using are as follows. For my cloak, I'm using the Cloak of the Weave. This gives us a +1 spell DC and a +1 spell to hit, which will make it a little bit easier for us to stack enough Arcane Acuity to get to 100% spell hit. It also allows us to absorb elements once per short rest, to take half damage on an elemental hit, and then get to add a d6 of that element to our next attack roll. You can get this item from the Devil's Fee once you unlock Hellsick special stock. For my chest, I'm using the Unity Scale Mail. This allows us to add our full dexterity modifier to our AC, and it does not impose disadvantage on stealth checks. It also grants us +1 to initiative. This is sold in Act 2 by Quartermaster Tally. For gloves, I'm using the Gauntlets of Hill Giant Strength. These set our strength to 23 and give us a +1 to strength saving throws. These are not super important to our build. Before this, I was using the Gloves of Archery, and then before that, I was using the Gloves of Balanced Hands. And really, both of those work fine as well. If you want the strength gloves, though, you'll get them by stealing them from the House of Hope. For my boots, I'm using the Evasive Shoes, and they give +1 to acrobatics and +1 to AC. Mattis sells these at the Last Light Inn in Act 2. For our weapons, I am using 2 finesse weapons. The first one is going to be Knife of the Undermountain King. This reduces the number to crit by 1, so we crit on a 19 and a 20. It also gives us advantage on targets that are obscured. This can be bought or looted from one of the Githyanki and the Githyanki Kresh. Our other melee weapon is the Sword of Lifestealing. On a critical hit, this does an additional 10 necrotic damage, and it gives us 10 temp HP. This is sold by Damon in Act 2. For our amulet swap, I'm using the Surgeon Subjugation Amulet. This lets us paralyze a humanoid target on a critical for 2 turns once per long rest. You can loot this item off of Malice Thorn in the House of Healing. Our second ring swap is the Risky Ring. This gives us advantage on all attacks, but it gives us disadvantage on all saving throws. But we're always at range, and this is where Fog Cloud comes into play, so we're very rarely going to get targeted or hit. If there are multiple enemies that can target us at range, we just drop the fog cloud on top of ourselves and then jump out when we need to attack and jump back in when our turn is over. You can get the risky ring from the Drow vendor and Moonrise Towers. And last but not least, our 2 hand crossbows. Our main hand, we're using the Hellfire hand crossbow. This has a pretty high base damage, which is the main reason why we're using it. But it also has a chance to inflict burning on enemies that you attack from hiding or invisible. It also grants Scorching Ray, but we'll almost never use this ability. You get this crossbow from Yurgir and the Gauntlet of Shar. And lastly, our offhand crossbow is Firestoker. This does additional damage to targets that are burning, so it's got pretty nice synergy with the Hellfire crossbow, but not really that super important. The main reason why we use this as well is because it's got a pretty high base damage. This can be found in a chest in the Grim Forge next to where you fight some Hellboars. Well, that's the build, and I've been having an absolute blast playing this build. The cool thing about this build is that you don't really need the Helmet of Arcane Acuity or the Band of Mystic Scoundrel to make it really fun and really powerful. You're still shooting about 11 times a turn and doing a pretty decent amount of damage, and couple that with Bloodlust Elixir, and it's a pretty strong build on its own without the ability to just permanently lock down any enemy that you want. Let me know in the comments section if you have any questions or if there's any other awesome builds you want me to showcase or go over. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing, as it does really help with the YouTube algorithm. Till next time, have a great day/night. See ya.